Welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. This is our second Key Insights webinar, looking at the business and tech challenges of 2018, based on some research that BCS have just undertaken with leaders, CIOs, and those with teams in the IT sector. These are the three things that we'll be specifically looking at today. The top three priorities for digital leaders during the year, the key technologies that organisations are prioritising, and views on resource challenges and the skill sets that are needed for the future. And we'll be doing that with our guest. We'll have a little Q&A at the end. A little bit of housekeeping just on this slide. If you want to ask a question, you can just maximise the control panel by pressing that orange button, the orange arrow, on the GoToWebinar panel there. It will show a questions panel which you can type directly into. And we'll try and answer as many of those as we can at the end of the session. Our guest speaker is Jason Oliver, who's Director of ICT at the Science Museum. Jason, perhaps I could just ask you to introduce yourself.
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, Brian. I am Jason Oliver. I am Director of ICT for the Science Museum Group. That's an alliance of 5 national museums across the UK, including the Science Museum, the National Railway Museum, Museum of Science and Industry, the National Science and Media Museum, and Locomotion. I'm a BCS Chartered Fellow, so I've got my CITP. Outside of my day job, I'm also an independent member of my local authority Standards and Audit Committee. I do some work as a governor for my daughter's local primary school, and I'm a trustee of Charity IT Leaders, which is another really, really important charity, much like the BCS, in helping us drive forward the industry.
Well, welcome, Jason. We appreciate having you here. Jason's going to be essentially our voice of sanity. He's a person that's actually working in all these areas at the moment, in a very interesting area indeed, the Science Museum. Today, in fact, we're at, maybe you can tell from the picture on the wall at the back, we're at the Imperial War Museum, so we appreciate their assistance in letting us have this space today. This is Jason's view on the report itself, that it identifies some important issues, constancy of change, and that we need to help people to navigate these things, and that's of course what BCS is here for. A little bit of background on the research. It says 4 years here, but I think it might be a bit longer. We've been doing research that initially started off as what the CIO wanted from the CEO and what they thought they might actually get, and over the years it's just evolved a little bit to broaden out to wider business issues. And this year particularly we've been looking more at the capability and education area, which of course is key for BCS. So we're going to start with some discussions here on some of the findings. Every now and again we'll have a little quote, we have a lot of verbatims from the report, which Jason's going to give us feedback on. The first one then is the top 3 priorities for leaders in 2018. These questions that you could tick more than one, and then we ask for a main one. And the main one, as you can see from the thing there, is transformation. But that's how they panned out. And here's the quote that somebody gave us, Jason. There's a worrying lack of commitment to innovation across UK PLC. How do you feel about that?
My experience is actually to the contrary. I believe that with the velocity of technology change just increasing constantly, innovation is a byproduct of what we do in ICT now. We're constantly looking for new ways to be efficient, constantly looking for new ways to improve, and I just see that as actually growing more and more over the years to come. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. Obviously, there must be, that must be the perception of certain people, and I wonder if it's actually specific to the sectors in which they're operating, as opposed to the more general UK PLC. As I think we're riding a wave at the moment of massive amounts of innovation and creativity, particularly with things like Brexit, the recession that we've been through over recent years, and an expectation on us to do more with less. And the byproduct of that is that innovation is essential.
I think that there's quite a broad range of respondents we had. Just over a third were from organisations of 5,000 people and above. maybe innovation feels a little bit slower in a large organisation.
Absolutely.
That might well be it.
It could well be the case, yes.
What's your reactions to this top priorities here, Jason? So what we've got here, the top one, business transformation and organisational change. Is that your experience? That's still a big challenge for yourselves?
Absolutely, yeah. I think actually when you link that together with continuous innovation and operational efficiencies, there's three there that all sit hand in hand. And as I was just saying, I think that that's just going to continue to increase as we go forward. I don't see any of them slowing down anytime in the next, decade or so. The one that's really interesting to me is the regulatory compliance element. And the reason that I find it interesting is obviously most people would attribute that with GDPR and the introduction of GDPR this year. One, that sends a really worrying message because what's the state of data protection prior to the GDPR getting onto people's radars, that it's become this massive priority.
Sure.
We should have always been looking after people's personal data as we would expect people to look after their own. But it really has focused people's minds. Us, for example, at the group, we've been doing a GDPR project this year where we've been tweaking certain things and putting some new processes in. But running in parallel to that, we've been doing Cyber Essentials Plus and revisiting PCI DSS. And the three different regulatory areas, we've been able to do single pieces of work that covered all three areas, which has really strengthened the governance and the compliance elements of the way we operate organisationally. So I think this has been a real opportunity for us. It's been an overhead, and I know a lot of people frown when they're talking around this area of work, but actually it's hugely important for us to do things in a compliant manner and to look after people's data as we would want people to look after their own.
Well, as we speak, the Cambridge Analytica story is getting bigger and bigger and getting a lot of traction, isn't it? So actually making sure we're compliant gives a base level of confidence at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was expecting in the verbatim comments to see a lot about GDPR actually. In fact, we didn't. And I just wondered if that's reflected here, that people are aware that regulatory compliance is an issue and have just kind of taken that as, well, it's something we've just got to accept. Let's not moan about it. Let's just get on with it.
I think the moaning was probably a year ago when a lot of people, it started getting onto their radar. They had objectives set around GDPR for the coming year. And I think now people have seen that actually there's real benefits in doing data protection well.
Yes.
And, it can help you maximise your income streams because you can, rid yourself of a lot of the data that you might have been holding on to indefinitely, and actually by purging some of that, you can find yourself with a much cleaner base of customers with which to work with. So there's huge amounts of benefits of doing it. For some people, it's been a lot of work. Yeah, absolutely, and perhaps taking them back somewhat. Yes.
Let's move on to the technologies themselves. So this is our findings for the top technologies that organisations are prioritising. And the one that everyone's singled out was cybersecurity. So when they're asked to single one out, there's no great surprise that that's the one that came out on top. But these are the ones when they had multiple options that came out. Again, cybersecurity, the biggest, cloud, big data and insight, obviously a lot of crossover there. The as a service model and IT governance. Again, what's your reaction to that? How does that fit in with your experience at the Science Museum?
Well, when I joined the Science Museum Group 3 years ago now, we adopted the government's cloud first policy. That doesn't mean everything goes to the cloud. It means that we consider the cloud first. And that could be a number of different elements. That could be platform as a service. It could be just standard public cloud. It could be software as a service. And we're actually utilising all of those different elements. We also have our own private data centre, which we're using hyper-converged infrastructure. And the benefit of that is we can move things between our public cloud and our data centre, dependent, or we will be able to go forward, dependent on what's the most commercially advantageous for us at any given time. and that's really building a degree of flexibility into our infrastructure that historically would never have been there. Certainly with the old traditional server racket and on-prem model,
Yes.
which is what we had 3 years ago. So we've got a great deal more agility now. I think looking at a number of these findings and the findings in the report itself, agility, the ability to be able to respond quickly, comes through in a number of streams.
It does, yes. That's very true. I was interested in your view on the what we might call the trendier sort of buzzwordy type things. I was expecting to see a little bit more concern about IoT or AI applications and that sort of thing, which haven't particularly come up, to be absolutely honest. Is that because it's just a bit too much froth at the moment, or?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think there's some. I think that AI particularly is a game changer. We're using it in several different ways at the moment, and it's making massive differences to us. I think what's really interesting is cloud is quite high. In
Yes.
fact, it's very high on here.
Yes.
But cloud has been around for many, many years
Yes,
now,
it has.
and adoption rates are still going up, as we can see by these results. But that's taken 5 or 6 years to get to this level.
Yeah.
And so there was a degree of trust, a degree of maturity that was required before it got elevated to these positions. I think what we will see is some of these, as you refer to, buzzword text, such as IoT, machine learning, AI. I think we'll see them elevated to these positions in a much shorter time frame. I think that in 2 or 3 years, AI will be probably at the levels the cloud is showing here after 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So these disruptive technologies, I think, will become mainstream much, much faster as we go forward. And it goes back to the original point I made earlier on, and that's because the velocity of technology transformation is just increasing all of the time.
Yeah.
I think there's certain things that will, just remain buzzwords and then will fall by the wayside.
It's
A bit like 3D TV.
but one. Yes.
Yeah, but I, for one, think that AI is with us for the long haul, and I think it's going to transform the way almost every industry in this country operates.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of the Gartner hype cycle about this, isn't it? It depends where we are on the curve a little bit. So we read a lot about AI and the Internet of Things at the moment, but when we actually ask specific questions, companies are more concerned about cybersecurity and cloud. What's your experience of the cybersecurity situation at the moment? Have you had any issues you've had to deal with that you can speak about at the Science Museum?
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern. We've invested heavily in cybersecurity over the last few years. We are building security. Everything we design, everything we implement now, security is one of the number one considerations into design. I think the challenge is that the nature of threats is constantly evolving. So it doesn't matter how much you do, you're never going to get completely to a point of being fully protected. And I think what's really, really important, certainly for CEOs and board members to understand, is one-off investments in security is not good enough. Because the nature of threats is constantly evolving, it has to be a sustained investment that continues going forward. Because as soon as you implement something, the following day, it can be considered legacy to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
It's an iterative process of constantly trying to make yourself more robust and put frameworks in place that will protect you to the best of your abilities and to the best that you can afford. But it's a really, really important message for all digital and IT leaders to be out there educating their boards that actually, a one-off purchase just isn't going to cut it in this area. It has to be sustained.
The issue of communicating with the board is going to come up a little bit later. Actually, I'd like to pick up on that again later on. If that's okay. Well, we had this quote here. This is one of our verbatums. We don't understand risk, basing our estimation on likelihood of experience, on experience rather than possibility. How do you feel about that? Do you think there's a little bit of an instinctive approach as opposed to a measured one?
I think there is. I think it's natural. I think the way media portray things, it resonates and it changes perceptions. And if something's high profile, like you mentioned earlier on about the data breach with Cambridge, I think that instantly being on the front page of newspapers and all over social media raises people's awareness to it, and subconsciously they then start thinking about that, and it elevates their concerns around that area. Whereas the reality of it may be something far different. The possibility, as per this example, may be far less significant than the perception.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on here. This is a key area for us. The key resources and the skill sets that we might consider in the future. Obviously, from a BTS perspective, this is our area, one that we're very much interested in. So oops, I just went a bit further there. By the way, we've had a few comments in. Thank you very much. We haven't had any questions yet. So if anybody would like to put a question onto the GoToWebinar system here for Jason, or to talk about the report, please do. So this is our findings on the resource challenges. A lot of it around skills in the workforce and additional staff. Interesting that money, in the absolute sense of budget, only came third here. People were more concerned about skill levels. Is that your experience as you've spoken to your peers?
Yeah, definitely. And again, it keeps linking back to the earlier point about the increased velocity of change. You can't, and you shouldn't just be constantly looking to bring in new staff members or to have a turnover of staff. It's really, really important that people can develop the skills that they have to be able to meet the challenges of using these new technologies efficiently. So I completely agree with this. Enhanced IT capability and skills in existing workforce is absolutely paramount for me. There's other things that it's a wider element here. I do quite a bit of mentoring, certainly within my own team, and I think it's really, really important to use many, many different methods to enhance the IT capability and the skills, empowering people to do new things, giving people confidence to do new things and to learn and develop themselves. But yeah, absolutely agree. This is absolutely paramount.
So the number there that worries a little bit is that we have enough resources to do the job, just sits at 14%.
I think it's an interesting one. When digital or technology teams start to show good, then there's more expectation that's placed on them. And as we live in an increasingly digital world, people are using technology in their own homes, and they're expecting that then in the workplace.
Yes.
And when you combine both of those elements, there is a much, much greater expectation on the digital or technology teams to do more within their working environments. And so I suffer this myself, where I don't feel as though I have enough resource to meet the demands and the expectations that the organisation might have. So we do the best with what we can. And unfortunately, one of the toughest things as a CIO is having to say no, because you're constantly trying to build up relationships. You're constantly trying to push the boundaries and improve things. And you don't really want to say no, but you have to.
Yes.
And it's a real balancing act.
Yeah.
But I think everyone in my position will at some point or another have resonated with that particular
Absolutely, yeah. The quote we've got here from a commenter: we need improved qualifications and training and to mentor current staff. You've already mentioned mentoring. What's your mix at the Science Museum with regards to sort of on-the-job training and other qualifications?
We've been really fortunate in that I inherited a really great team of people with a great deal of willingness to develop new things. So we've developed a development function, software development function, and we've taken people from within the team and actually exposed them to new tech, exposed them to different training methods, different training environments, sent them out doing shadowing of other organisations, and then bringing that skill back to create an in-house development function. I think it's right. I think there is good training out there. I think we should be using our peer groups far more than we do to leverage experience. I think the idea of sending my guys out for a week to shadow another organisation who's doing something really well is a massive benefit to them.
Yeah.
And they bring back a real enthusiasm and they want to do things differently and they try to bring that passion back into the team. And that can only be a benefit to us. And it don't cost anything. You know, anyone can do this. You've just got to have good relationships with other people, not even in your sector. An interesting one on this. So we've been doing a project to digitise 320,000 objects over the next 2 years, creating digital twins. And we've been using a mixture of AI, microservices, to do rapid data capture and pushing content out to the web. It's a really exciting project, and it's going to open up our collection to the whole world, which is really exciting. But what's been really interesting is that the team have started working in an agile way. The first time that the guys involved in this team have. We've brought in an agile coach who's mentored them through the process. They started using these new tools like APIs, microservices, and the enthusiasm coming out of that is just huge. I published something on LinkedIn a little while ago about this piece of work, and I've had conversations with people from way outside of our sector, the museum sector or the charity sector now, who have been interested in what we were doing because they see the concept around the digital twin, the digitisation, the automation as something they can take into their own sectors. And this might be construction and things like that. So, you know, you don't need to be constrained by the area you work.
Yeah.
I've got a great group of peers in the museum sector, but I'm not going to learn everything I need to know for them.
No.
I need to be out there talking to Premiership football teams about the way that they engage with their audience, the way they do retail. I need to be out there engaging with construction companies about how they deliver spaces like we would with a gallery.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to find innovation. Yeah. And so I think this whole resourcing element is a really interesting conundrum.
That's an interesting point. Thanks for that. So we've had a couple of questions in. Let's deal with them as we go, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because some of these are quite relevant to the conversation we're having right now. So Kawa Hamid has just sent a question into us. Jason mentioned the velocity of technology in the context of innovation. There are many technology pulses to keep a finger on, perhaps too many.
Yeah.
How should organisations deal with this? E.g., is there a digital innovation think tank in the Science Museum? It's two questions there, really, isn't there?
There isn't an internal think tank around innovation, but regular dialogue with stakeholders across the organisation around emerging technologies. I have an extremely close relationship with our digital director, with good relations with our commercial director, our COO, director of corporate services. And so talking to all of those different people about emerging tech, helping them feed into their strategies, and then helping them deliver their strategies is really important. So no, the simple answer is we don't have a think tank. We have a group of peers within the museum who we bounce ideas off of each other, and we're constantly looking at ways of moving forward.
Okay, that's nice, thank you. I've got quite a specific question from Nikita Sharma's written in. What skills do business analysts need to start developing in this changing digital landscape?
Good question. Absolutely fundamental need to be able to build engagement with the wider group. So for far too often historically, ICT has been looked at as a supplier and not as a partner. And certainly in the Science Museum Group, we created a business engagement function around three years ago nearly now. And you know, that's helped us move from supplier to, I suppose you'd call it enabler now. Collaborator. We're not, I don't feel, at the level of maturity net to say that we are a sustained partner across all of the different areas of the group, but that's our aspiration.
Yes.
We want to be an innovator, and you need to be a partner to do that, because people need to trust what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think for me, trust, the ability to engage, the ability to certainly take wider business ideas, talk in a wider business language, but then bring back to the ICT department and be able to find ways that technology can be attributed to that business thought. A BA shouldn't be out there solutionising, as I'm sure person knows.
Yes.
Yes. But it's interesting. Some of my guys have actually done the business analytics diploma, which I think the BCS actually partners on with the accrediting body. And I certainly did it myself many years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was really, really good, really important for me, and opened up my eyes to a lot of things around engagement, requirement solicitation, Venn diagrams, and all really, really important skills for a BA to have. A BA is absolutely crucial for the modern IT department, because they are the conduit to the wider business.
Yes, and that fits in with feeding back to the board that we were mentioning earlier, doesn't it, in straightforward language. Our next slide is just looking at addressing some of the gaps that organisations might perceive they have. So these were some of the things that came back in the research. Biggest one being upskilling on the drop training, so we've already been discussing that. Any thoughts on some of these other ones? You've mentioned mentoring. We've got professional certifications down here, apprenticeships. We can hear more and more about that. BCS are very involved in that space. Is that something you have experience with?
Absolutely. I've had apprentices now every year since 2005. I see them as an absolutely fundamental part of my team building as I go forward. Having the opportunity to bring somebody in to teach them what professional behaviour looks like, to teach them about the way that you would want people to operate within your organisation, and build that into them as early as possible into their career, actually helps them really flourish as they go forward. Over that, 13 years, I think I've probably had about 9 apprentices, and some of them have stayed with me. Some of them have gone on to do some really well, and actually got quite senior in organisations. Other ones, it's not for everyone. That's why they do an apprenticeship.
Yes.
But it's a really important tool, and it's a really important element of the departments that I have, that we have that ability to teach people early in their career.
Excellent.
Looking at other ones on there, I've mentioned mentoring, career development planning. I think we could all benefit from doing more of that.
Yeah. Business can help there.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, we are using Sophia for our engineering team going forward, and that's really useful, because it allows people to understand what they need to do to progress, what they need to do to move forward. And Sophia is a fantastic framework for doing that. It was really interesting, because I was having a conversation with trade unions and with some of our HR colleagues around Sophia, and it was really easy to sell the benefits of it, and yet actually it's not probably as well known outside the public sector as it should be, because it can be adopted by pretty much any organisation. So career development planning, really important. I think also when you're a CIO, and because of the amount of change going on, it's important to be able to plan your own career as well at that level. And too often we're too busy and we forget until it's time to look for a new job, and then it's a mad rush.
Yes.
But being able to set yourself plans and targets which might go out over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, can really help you in moving forward to where your aspirations will take you.
Interesting, thank you. We've had a few more questions in. We'll address some of them at the end. One I will just take now. Gary Spokes has written in: do you think IT professionals need to ensure they add a business management qualification to their CV?
I think that would be fantastic. I would like us to get to a point, and I increasingly can see it happening, where ICT isn't a separate function. That ICT is just, there isn't the business and ICT. ICT is the business. We're all increasingly becoming technology companies because technology underpins nearly everything we do in modern society. And it's absolutely crucial for IT professionals to be able to progress. They need to speak the language of the business, of the wider business, and they need to understand how what they do affects the bottom line, how it affects the strategic objectives of the organisation. So absolutely, I would definitely advocate that.
Lovely, thank you. Well, a question we ask every year is what keeps people awake at night? This was some of the answers we got.
My 5 or 3-year-olds keep me awake at night.
Yes, we meant more on the worrying aspect, I think. Yes. Here's a short list, because you imagine we've got quite a lot of answers to this. Some of them to do with children, but tech-related and public policy-related. Anything there chiming with you? One that leapt out to me particularly, I think, was just at the bottom there, ageism, because one of the things we haven't seen much comment on priorities at least, is dealing with sort of the diversity issue. The BCS are quite keen on, raising issues around that. We've been doing a bit of work on that of late. What are your thoughts on those areas?
I think diversity is an issue. I mean, I wouldn't take ageism as specific because, ethnicity, the amount of females operating within the IT industry, I think they all contribute to this diversity challenge. And I think we do need to take it upon ourselves to do more to become more diverse. There is direct links between diversity and things like cybersecurity. If we've not got diverse groups of people looking at how we position our cybersecurity, we're not necessarily going to be capturing the mentalities that are needed to give us the protection elements that we need. Certainly, Charity IT Leaders, last year at our annual conference, it was all based around diversity, and specifically diversity within cybersecurity, because there is a real risk run that if it's just the traditional white middle-aged man looking after cybersecurity elements for an organisation, then they're only capturing one particular view of how they should be protecting. So I think diversity is a big issue for us.
In fact, Sarah Wilson-Medhurst has just sent a question: how can we improve diversity, get more girls and women into and retained within the industry?
It's actually... It's
not easy to answer in one go, is it?
It's not, but it goes right the way back to school. And how do we retain people in STEM subjects, certainly females in STEM subjects? How do we then translate that from leaving school to going on to university or college? Because we see a massive drop of females who have done STEM subjects throughout their school career. When it then comes to going through college and into university, the drop-off figures and the comparisons with STEM subjects at university is substantially different. So there's something wrong with our education programs in this country, where we're seeing that massive decline. And it's really of the utmost concern to me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a part of CITL. It's one of the reasons why I'm a governor at a school, because I personally want to do what I can to help change that.
There's some research from BCS on the education sector stuff, so look out for that one. On this one about sleepless nights, go back to a question that Jackie Hogan asked us a little bit earlier. You mentioned AI as a technology to watch. What 2 or 3 other technologies should CIOs be looking at now? Perhaps not having sleepless nights, but thinking about.
Well, for me, this year, the adoption of microservices has been utterly transformative. Not only has it helped us with automation and workflows and things like that, and that saved time around the digitisation process. This week we had an issue with our finance system, and we lost the ability, due to an upgrade on Office 365, to be able to do some stuff that we needed to do. And using traditional routes, my team, they just couldn't find a way to resolve this issue. Rollback wasn't an option. And so we passed it across to our development team to have a look at. And they said, well, that's fine. What we can do is we can create a link here. We can do some transforming through the snaps that we use to do the connection, and then we can push the output out to this other end. No worries. And 6 months ago, before we started using microservices, we just wouldn't have been able to do this work. We would have had to gone back to our finance team and said, sorry, this is something you've got to live with, which would have been hugely damaging to our reputation, hugely frustrating to the finance system.
Their morale would take the hit, wouldn't it? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So finding new ways of unlocking these sort of things is really, really fascinating. So for me, automation, artificial intelligence, microservices are the three things that help me sleep at night.
Okay, there you go. Lovely. Nice positive way of looking at it. On this issue of communication between the technically minded and the less technically minded, Louisa Item has sent in a question. You mentioned the importance of having business analysts. What about a business engagement team?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier on, I created a business engagement team. That was one of the first things I did when I restructured just after I joined the organisation. I've got a head of business engagement and development, and he's constantly out there talking to the business, the wider business units, and actually understanding, what's happening. Him and his team then bring that back into a demand process that we have, and it's at that point that the BAs then start looking at, well, how might this look? What might we do here? Going back, having the conversations, building up the picture to the point where we can meet the needs of our end users and our customers, not in a way that we might have done historically, where this is what we think you need, but through a dialogue of understanding what they need to the point where they're actually giving us all the insight.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. This is our takeaway slide.
Yeah.
This is our last actual slide. We've got one or two other questions we can just come in as well. These are things we draw out the report, that we need to base security decisions on hard data. That's about the perception issue we were discussing earlier. An innovation focus, using the various supports around mentoring, perhaps even being part of that mix. Multi-stranded upskilling, education, mentoring, domain qualifications, obviously we think of BCS there, aren't we? And also, just for us as the BCS, our input into the broader benefit to society. How do you feel about that?
I think this is really important. I know this is only the second one of these webinars. For me, it's really, really important that the BCS are more vocal, are out there and actually are pushing their voice out. Because as professionals within our industry, we need that behind us. We need the BCS, and we need to understand what our peers within the BCS are thinking about. And, like with most chartered professions, actually their members rely on that chartered body to help drive forward their industry. And the BCS certainly can be more vocal in doing that. Yeah. There's some fantastic work that the BCS do. And I almost caveated that by saying behind the scenes. And it needs to be more visual or more vocal. Yes. And that will provide broader IT benefit to society. There's some great stuff happening.
Okay, thank you for that. So a couple of other questions that we could just perhaps finish off with. We had a lot in, so thank you for that, everybody. Let's try and work this machine. Are there already trends or alarm bells ringing for business and tech challenges for 2019? Do we foresee risks materialising via the adoption and utility of digital tool sets or services? Challenges.
I think we're always horizon scanning. I wouldn't say it's just 2019. Whilst I've advocated the use of artificial intelligence today, there needs to be some governance around how AI is to be used in organisations going forward. I think that there's a requirement, certainly in my role, but all the way down to the service desk engineer, to be able to look forward and consider the decisions that they're taking today and what is the long-term ramifications of those. So I wouldn't say that it's just 2019. I think that everything that we're doing when we're introducing new technology and changing the way we're working, we need to be thinking about the risks and the long-term ramifications of the actions that we take.
Yeah. Here's a more specific question. That was broad. This is a bit narrower. Kamal Mahenda Pala writes, domain knowledge, brackets, banking, transport, logistics, etc., for IT professionals, is it essential? I'm going to say yes myself, but
I think, yeah, it is. It is. I think increasingly well, no, but let's just say this. Yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we covered all the questions that we have. If we've missed any, folks, please do contact me privately or via my Twitter handle at Brian Runson, and we'll see if we can have another chat. But what we'd like to do is thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us today. It's been very handy. We've appreciated your answers. You give us some lovely insight. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening.